Learn all about living in Mexico City from expat Leigh Thelmadatter in this video interview with expats in Mexico. Leigh, why did you move to Mexico?
I moved to Mexico for a job. I was recruited by a private university system called the Tec de Monterrey to teach at their campus in a city called Toluca, which is just west of Mexico City. My initial plan was to stay here for 2 years and return back to the U.S., but as is the case for so many of us, I'm still here.
And that's how long ago?
That was in 2003, 17 years ago.
17 years, so you qualify as a really veteran expat.
More or less, yes.
So did you teach there for a long time?
I taught in Toluca for 5 years, and then I transferred to Mexico City and taught at that campus for another 10 years.
And what were you teaching?
I taught advanced ESL and academic writing.
So we're really happy to have you as a writer for expats in Mexico.
Thank you. Yes, I'm working on the hard part about going from academic writing to blog type writing is that academics tend to be very verbose. So the hardest part for me in writing articles is shortening it down from 5,000 words to 1,200.
And where do you live now in Mexico City?
I live in what I call the Colonia Fina de Doctores. It's a barrio just south of the Centro Histórico, historic center. It is a working class neighborhood, but it is very centric. So I'm a 2-minute walk from a metro station, and I can get to all of the museums and everything within half an hour. So there's one reason why I chose to buy my apartment here. I own it. The second was I had a choice between buying a nicer apartment in a nicer neighborhood and having no money to travel, or buying here and having money to travel. Well, priorities.
Very smart. So what does your apartment look like? I mean, how many rooms is it? And is
it's
it a
tiny.
big building or?
No, it's a typical middle class Mexican apartment. Back in 2008 when I bought, they were building a whole bunch of these in my area because I'm also betting that, eventually this area will go up. It's so, and it has its ups and downs. And so this was new construction, which is a good thing when you live in earthquake-prone Mexico City. And also it was easier to buy and make sure you had clear title. And the apartment is very small, very basic. It's a 2-bedroom, 55 square meters. But the biggest advantage I got very lucky with this apartment, is that I have a balcony. A balcony apartment is really hard to get. And it's really a question of luck. What happened was when I initially looked at the apartments here, they told me all the front apartments had been spoken for by a group of buyers, and then something changed with the Infonavit mortgage rules, and they had to drop it. And I was there, and I snagged this apartment real quick, and so I have an apartment with some light and some air.
Aren't you lucky?
Yes.
How much did you pay for that back in 2009?
Hang on, 550,000 pesos. And I think the last time I checked its value, it's like 1.2 million. So not bad.
Not bad.
No, I'm not going to lose any money on this.
It sounds like you fit in very well with your local neighborhood because you're fluent in Spanish.
I'm fluent in Spanish, and there's a lot of similarities between Mexico City attitude and New Jersey, New York attitude. So, not just speaking Spanish, but
you have the tonality right.
I have the tonality. I can use the bad words in a way that the locals aren't offended. I offend more Americans than I do Mexicans, I must admit.
Are you part of the expat community there, or are you just...
Expat community in Mexico, that's a very interesting question. There really isn't a expat community. There are various. The city is so big, and people come here for different reasons that we tend to congregate in different circles. So for example, those of us who are teachers tend to kind of congregate with other teachers. And a lot of them are in the Roma, Condesa, and general area, which is just to the west of where I am. And then you have the corporate people, and they tend to be more west in the upper class areas, but they don't tend to mix with us. And then if you live in any other part of the city, because it's so hard to get from point A to point B here, you really don't have a lot of chance to physically get involved, which is one of the reasons why I'm trying to put together a group for people who are fans of folk art here in Mexico City, because there have been successful groups of that type in Ajijic, especially in Ajijic, that it's not easy because somebody who lives in the far south is not going to come all the way up here. So far, what we've been doing is meeting online. That seems to be working out pretty well.
Well, in a city of that size, it makes a lot of sense.
It does. It really does. Right now, the traffic's really good, but not for a good reason.
Exactly. So, how did you become an expert in folk art?
I started traveling around like everybody else does. I went and did the usual tourist things, Acapulco, Tasco, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And after a couple of years, I realized two problems. A, my knowledge of Mexico was really superficial. And my Spanish really needed to improve. I spend as an English teacher, I spend all day teaching in English. So and before I met and married my husband, I really didn't have a chance to speak Spanish. My husband is Mexican, by the way. And so I decided I needed to do something. And I actually started working with Wikipedia. And it was purely as a hobby, just as something to kill some time. And I started out with geography because I found, the coverage of Mexico in English at that time was absolutely atrocious. I now call it less atrocious, not because of me, but, it's a little bit better. But there was so much that needed to be done. I could just pick and choose whatever. So all the small towns around me, because they started looking alike. When you live in the colonial area of Mexico, everything is colonial architecture, semi-Baroque or neoclassical, and then you have your church, your Palacio Municipal, and your plaza, right? And I figured, no, all the towns can't be the same, and the only way that you're going to find out what the differences are and what makes them unique is to read about them. Well, that information is in Spanish. Well, it's hard for me to read in Spanish. I get kind of dyslexic in foreign language. I don't know why. No one can explain it to me. So if I'm going to put all that effort into it, I want something to show for it. So I started reading in Spanish and writing the articles in English because Mexico doesn't need me to write articles in Spanish for them. And I started learning, and now I was starting to see all these places with new eyes. For example, shortly after I met my husband, I had already been to Tasco twice, and he hadn't been. He's Chilango. That's a Mexico City person, but he didn't travel too much. That's a problem a lot of Mexico City people have. And he had never been to Tasco, and I couldn't believe it. And I said, sure, I'll take you to Tasco. I thought I would be bored. But no, I had all my tour guide books with me. He had his camera. He's a photographer. And I went there looking, okay, I'm going to improve the article in Wikipedia on it. So we spent the entire weekend in Tasco. It was like I had never been there before. So we're in front of the church, which has this beautiful facade. And I'm reading here that says, there's an angel in this quadrant that has a face with indigenous features. Oh, so I'm looking at it, I go, there it is, honey, take a picture. And that's how I started really exploring Mexico. So over time, you start seeing the artisanias, the handcrafts in the markets, and you buy some like every other tourist does. And then after a while, you start asking yourself questions about them. And so over time, as I'm visiting more and more out of the way places, I'm actually finding the people making them, and I'm starting then to start reading about and learn more. And really, that's how I learned about handcrafts, and that's how I've learned what I have so far about fine art in Mexico, is by doing all of Wikipedia. The 10, 11 years that I worked with them almost exclusively really was my apprenticeship in Mexican culture. I've written about 800 some odd articles, written or improved. And I learned so much doing that. But around 2015, I was running into some barriers because you can only publish in Wikipedia what's already been published in reliable sources, which makes perfect sense given the way it's set up. Well, there's so much in this country that is important and deserves to be recognized, but I can't do it in Wikipedia because it doesn't sell newspapers, it doesn't sell books or whatever it is, that I decided I need to start doing some other things. So that's how I started the blog. I already had the background information, but now I can kind of focus on artisans that I thought deserved more attention than what they were getting, because then I can interview them and put that firsthand information into written form.
Do you travel to a lot of the artisan festivals around the country?
Festivals, not so much. They're hit and miss to a large extent. Some of the best ones right now that I know of, well, there's three. There's one in Chapingo, the Universidad de Chapingo, which is in Texcoco, just northeast of Mexico City. I think that's the best Mexican-run one. There is one in Ajijic, Chapala, which is run by the Feria de Maestros de Arte, which is very good. There's one, I haven't been up there yet, but I need to go, the one up in Baja Rosarito Art Fair, which by all accounts is extremely good. But it's way up there, so I haven't had a chance to go. Phone art is hit and miss, but the problem with phone art does have, they do set up ferias in various parts of the country, but they're absolutely atrocious in announcing them, even on their website. So I've not been, so it's just by luck if I happen to catch one. So it's really kind of hard to do it that way. The best way that I have found to find them has been a word of mouth and through all of the contacts that I've made over time, which is why I do the blog in part as well, because most of us don't have that opportunity to go and put that time in and find these people, especially when they require you to come back 2-3 times. There's cultural reasons for that. But most of us can't do that. So if I can put that information online in English, at least people know where to go looking and not spend 3 days trying to find the one person that really should be the person they should go to the beginning.
Have you furnished your home with many of the wonderful handcrafts that you found throughout Mexico?
Yeah, as small as it is, some of my artisan friends call it mini map. MAP is short for the Museo de Arte Popular, which is the major handcraft museum in Mexico City. Yes, the short answer is yes, and the long answer is there's really some stuff that's missing here.
What do you love about living in Mexico City?
The reason I moved to Mexico City and I put the effort into is that I wanted to live in the city. I'm from the New York metropolitan area. I grew up in the suburbs, bored out of my skull because this was before the internet. Had I been the internet generation, I'd be a complete and utter nerd, but I was born a little bit too soon for that. But I always thought if I lived in the city, everything would be exciting. And I always wound up in New Jersey. In Germany, I lived outside of Munich. In California, I lived outside of San Francisco. In Arizona, I lived outside of Tucson. Tucson isn't really a city anyway. In Mexico, I wind up in Toluca, which is about the same distance to Mexico City. So I used to spend weekends here. And I just took the plunge after about 5 years and said, I'm going to buy an apartment in Mexico City. I don't know how I'm going to live here, but I'm going to do it anyway. At least I can rent it out in the week, during the week, spend one weekend in the apartment. And that's what I did. And I got lucky, and a project that I had done in Toluca got me a job, got me a chance to transfer to another campus over here. And I'm now in the city. I am now near all of the cultural amenities that Mexico has to offer. Fortunately and unfortunately, all of the major cultural institutions are concentrated here in Mexico City. So I can get in touch with a lot of things, not only just for what's going on in Mexico City, but in other parts of Mexico, because even if the people from those other parts of Mexico, for example, the handcrafts done by indigenous peoples. I have a connection with the Instituto Nacional de Pueblos Indígenas. All I have to do is call the guy up and say, hey, I'm looking for information on X, and if he doesn't have it, he knows who does. And so I would not have that ability if I had not spent 10 years here. That said, now that I've had this wonderful experience of living in a major metropolitan area, my husband and I are thinking of moving out to Puebla.
Well, it's still a good sized city.
Is it, well, not Puebla the city, Puebla the state.
Oh, okay.
The lack of space is now getting, and we have way too many animals.
That's a problem in the city.
In the city, it is a problem, yes.
It is.
So,
Well,
but we want to move out, but not too far because I still need to come in here and do my work.
yeah. Well, listen, you sound like you absolutely are in love with Mexico and Mexico City, and even though you're contemplating moving to a slightly more less populated
Back to New
area.
Jersey.
Back to New
Legally.
Jersey, back to the suburbs. So, but absolutely delightful. I'm so thrilled to have you working with us at Expats in Mexico, and it's been a great conversation. And have a fantastic day.
You too, and it's a pleasure to work with you as well.
Great, thanks, Leigh.
All right, have a good day. Bye bye.
You too. Bye.